Why did the room fall silent the moment she spoke? No one could remember the exact second it happened. Only that laughter had been there, and then it was. One moment, the briefing room buzzed with confidence and routine bravado. The next, it felt like all the oxygen had been pulled out at once. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't smiled either. She stood near the back wall, posture relaxed but alert, hands folded behind her like someone who had learned long ago that stillness was safer than attention. Her uniform was clean, too clean, no visible rank, no unit patch, no name, just fabric and discipline and a calm that didn't belong in rooms like this. The Admiral's question had been meant as a joke. Everyone knew that. A harmless way to break tension. A ritual almost. Warriors laughed at numbers because it was easier than remembering faces. So, the Admiral had said, leaning back, confident, amused, "What's your kill count?" A few chuckles followed. A few glances toward her expecting deflection, humor, a grin. Instead, she stepped forward. 3 steps, no hurry, no hesitation. "Sir," she said, voice level, "my official number is classified." The room leaned in without realizing it. But unofficially, she paused, long enough for discomfort to bloom. 312. Silence didn't just fall, it collapsed. She didn't look proud or ashamed, she looked tired. And in that moment, something shifted. Not fear, recognition. The kind that comes when professionals realize they are standing near someone who has survived what others didn't. No one asked how. No one laughed again. What they didn't know, what none of them could see, was that every one of those numbers had a weight, a sound, a smell, a moment that returned at night when silence was loudest. And she carried them all alone. But this wasn't why she was here. Not yet. Because buried beneath that number was a truth she had kept hidden for 3 years. And if she spoke it too soon, people would die. Why would a woman, officially declared dead, be invited into a classified fleet exercise? The sealed folder sat on the table like a live round. No one touched it, not until the room emptied, not until doors locked and voices lowered. When the Admiral finally opened it, his hands trembled, not from age, but from understanding. She watched his face change page by page, the way disbelief turned into dread, the way certainty unraveled. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that this entire exercise is compromised?" "Yes, sir." "And that a man we buried is alive?" "Yes." "And that he's coming?" She nodded once. The man's name was never spoken out loud at first, as if saying it might give him power, a former commander, decorated, respected, brilliant. And corrupt. He had sold a mission, sold his team, sold the truth, then vanished beneath paperwork and lies. Everyone thought she was the only survivor. They were wrong. She was the only witness. And he had been hunting her ever since. Cities changed, names changed, faces changed, but sleep never did. "You could have stayed hidden," the Admiral said quietly. "I tried." "Then why now?" She reached into her sleeve and removed a black bracelet. Inside it, worn metal, a dog tag smoothed by years of touch. "My commander," she said, "died believing the truth would matter." She met his eyes. "I'm here to make sure it does." Outside the room, sailors laughed, drank coffee, trusted their schedules. Inside, the countdown had already begun. What happens when the enemy already knows your moves? 48 hours before dawn, the first anomaly appeared, a transmission routed through secure channels. Clean, quiet, wrong. She didn't panic. Panic was loud. Panic got people killed. Instead, she watched. Patterns always revealed themselves if you waited long enough. Someone aboard the ship was feeding information outward, someone grieving, someone angry, someone who believed they were doing the right thing. When she saw the name, her chest tightened, not with fear but recognition. her fallen commander's brother. Young, smart, broken in a way grief often breaks people cleanly at first, then deeper over time. When they met, his eyes held accusation before words ever could. "You left her," he said. She didn't interrupt, didn't defend. She let him say it, let him empty the poison someone else had poured into him. Then she played the recording. His sister's voice, weak, clear, unmistakable. The truth doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it simply exists. He cried without sound, like people do when something finally makes sense and hurts worse because of it. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I know." She gave him a choice. Help stop what was coming, or be remembered as part of it. He chose right. Too late to be clean, early enough to matter. Why would she volunteer for the most impossible part of the mission? Because some debts couldn't be shared. When the sea went dark and the fleet moved into position, she stood on the deck and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The enemy submarine surfaced like a shadow made solid, silent, confident, unaware. She boarded with 6 others, no speeches, no glory. Inside, metal corridors closed in. Air recycled through lives that didn't yet know they were seconds from catastrophe. She saw him. Older, calmer, still convinced he was smarter than consequences. "You survived," he said, almost admiring. "I adapted," she replied. He tried to bargain when he realized he was losing, tried to make survival sound like morality. He threatened cities, lives, innocents who would never know her name. She listened. Then she made a decision no one would ever praise her for. She shot him not to kill, to stop time. Blood changed the equation. Pain stripped arrogance away. He gave the codes because dying is honest when nothing else is. The launch aborted with seconds left. No applause followed. Just quiet. And breathing. What does victory feel like when it costs everything? At dawn, the ocean looked the same, calm, unaware. The fleet survived. Reports were filed. Truths surfaced slowly, reluctantly. Names were restored. Medals were posthumous. She testified once, clearly, without embellishment. Then she disappeared again. Not because she was broken, but because some people are meant to pass through moments, not remain in them. Before she left, she returned the dog tag. "To family," she said simply. He tried to thank her. She stopped him. "Live well," she said, "that's enough." Why do some warriors vanish while others are remembered? Because dignity doesn't need witnesses. Months later, the Admiral would still remember her answer, not the number, but the calm behind it. He understood now. Some people don't count kills. They count what they prevented. And sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do is carry the truth quietly and act when it finally matters. Because dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the Admiral stop, smiling the moment he opened the folder? The paper made almost no sound as it slid free, yet in the silence of the room it felt deafening. She watched his eyes move left to right, line by line, the way experienced commanders read, not skimming, not rushing, absorbing, calculating, remembering where they were when something similar had gone wrong before. At first his face showed confusion, then disbelief, then something colder. He didn't look up at her right away. She stood exactly where she had stopped after giving her answer, feet shoulder-width apart, shoulders squared, breathing steady, the kind of stillness learned only after years of controlling fear instead of letting it control you. The Admiral turned a page. And another. The color drained from his face so subtly that no one else would have noticed, but she did. She always noticed. It was how she stayed alive. "How long have you been officially dead?" he asked finally, voice quiet. "3 years," she replied. And unofficially, she hesitated just for a heartbeat. Longer. He closed the folder slowly as if sudden movement might make what he'd read explode. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the briefing room, boots passed. Laughter echoed faintly down the corridor. Normal life continuing without permission. You weren't supposed to exist, he said. This program was terminated, wiped. It was buried, she corrected, not terminated. The Admiral exhaled through his nose. Buried things have a habit of resurfacing. He leaned back in his chair, studying her now, not as a curiosity, not as a punchline, but as a variable he hadn't accounted for. A dangerous one. You're telling me, he said slowly, that someone inside my fleet is compromised. Yes, sir. And that a training exercise involving 6,000 sailors is about to become a live fire incident. Yes. And that the man responsible for one of the most controversial black failures of the last decade is alive. Yes. Each word landed heavier than the last. The Admiral stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. He stared out at the steel-gray ocean, jaw tight. He had spent his life believing in systems, in layers of command, in redundancy. And now, a woman who technically didn't exist was telling him those systems were already bleeding. Why come to me? He asked without turning. Why not Langley? Why not Special Operations Command? Because you still believe people matter, she said. That made him turn. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Men like him recognized the difference between leaders who protected reputations and leaders who protected lives. He looked at her again, really looked this time. The scar above her eyebrow wasn't dramatic, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Her hands were steady but worn, not from drills, from work. How many people know you're here? He asked. 2, she said. You and the person who's feeding him information. That landed like a blade. You're certain? She nodded. He's careful, patient. He doesn't move unless he believes he's invisible, which means he already has eyes inside your command. The Admiral returned to the table, palms resting against the wood. And you believe he'll strike during the exercise. I know he will. How? She hesitated again, not from uncertainty but from memory. Because that's when everyone will assume the explosions are simulated. The Admiral closed his eyes briefly. He'd seen that logic before. In war, the best time to kill someone was when they thought it couldn't possibly be real. He opened his eyes. Tell me about him, he said. Not his resume, not the sanitized version, the man. She inhaled slowly. He believes loyalty is a weakness, she said. That ideals are tools. He doesn't hate his country. He just doesn't value it more than himself. Why you? The Admiral asked. Why has he been chasing you for 3 years? She reached up and touched the black bracelet on her wrist. Just once, not dramatically, just enough to remind herself why she hadn't stopped running. Because I lived, she said, and because I remember. The Admiral didn't ask her to explain further. He already understood. Silence returned to the room, heavier now, not awkward, grave. Walk me through it, he said at last. Not the classified report, what actually happened. She didn't want to. She did anyway. Why do some memories stay sharp, while others blur completely? She remembered the smell first. Burned concrete, cordite, blood. The mission had been clean on paper, surgical, in and out, minimal exposure. She had trusted the plan because she trusted the man who signed it. That was her mistake. We were inserted just before dawn, she said, voice even. No resistance at first. That should have been our first warning. The Admiral listened without interrupting. We reached the facility, too quiet, no patrols, no reaction. When the first shot came, it came from behind us. She paused. They knew exactly where we'd enter. She described the ambush clinically, the way medics describe wounds. Not because it didn't hurt, but because breaking would make it worse. They targeted leadership first, communications second, extraction third. She swallowed once. Our commander ordered a retreat, not because the mission failed, but because someone wanted survivors gone. The Admiral's hand tightened on the edge of the table. My commanding officer stayed, she continued. She had wounded who couldn't move. She said extraction would come. Did it? No. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. She recovered. She held the position for 3 hours. I held pressure, counted breaths, promised things I couldn't deliver. The Admiral didn't look away. She died telling me not to let him erase them. Erase, that was the word that mattered. Everyone else was already gone, she said. By the time I moved, I was alone. And you still completed the objective, the Admiral said quietly. Yes. At what cost? She met his eyes. That depends on how you measure it. Silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was respectful. You could have disappeared forever, he said. No one would have blamed you. I tried, she replied. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw names turning into footnotes. She straightened. And now he's planning something bigger, louder, something that will drown the truth permanently. The Admiral nodded once, decision settling in. You'll have full access, he said. Communications, intelligence, movement logs. And the crew, she asked. They don't need to know who you are, he replied, just that they should listen. She accepted that. Fame was dangerous. Anonymity kept you alive. One condition, he added. She waited. When this is over, you don't disappear again. Her jaw tightened. That wasn't part of the deal. No, he said, but it's part of accountability. She looked away briefly toward the window, toward the water. I'll consider it, she said. It was the closest thing to agreement he was going to get. Why does fear feel different when you're responsible for thousands of lives? Later, alone in the temporary operations room, she spread out the maps, sea lanes, communication windows, response times, everything he would exploit. Her mind moved fast, but her chest felt tight. She hadn't led openly in years. Ghosts didn't issue orders, they reacted, they survived. Now people would die or live based on what she said next. That weight pressed differently. She traced a finger along a choke point, remembering another place like it. Another night, another mistake. You're thinking too far ahead, she murmured to herself. She exhaled, refocused. Find the leak first. That was the rule, always. Someone aboard this ship believed a lie strongly enough to risk treason. Someone grieving, someone angry, someone convinced the system had failed them. She didn't hate them yet. Hate came later. For now, she needed clarity. She opened a secure terminal and began cross-referencing access logs. Who saw what, when, how often. Patterns always existed. You just had to be patient enough to let them reveal themselves. Hours passed unnoticed. At some point, the Admiral returned, standing quietly in the doorway, watching her work. You don't look like someone who enjoys this, he said. I don't, she replied without looking up. Then why keep doing it? Her fingers paused over the keys. Because walking away doesn't bring anyone back, she said, and stopping doesn't undo what's already in motion. He nodded slowly. Outside, the fleet prepared for an exercise they believed was controlled. Inside, one woman prepared for a war no one else knew was coming. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a man who thought himself untouchable smiled, certain that the truth would die quietly, just like it had before. He was wrong, but she would make him understand why. Not with speeches, not with numbers, with consequences. Why does betrayal hurt more when it wears a familiar face? The first warning didn't come as an alarm. It never did. It arrived quietly, buried inside routine, an encrypted packet routed through 3 clean relays, masked as maintenance chatter, invisible unless you were looking for the absence of noise. She was. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. There it was. A transmission that didn't belong. She didn't feel anger. Not yet. What she felt was a slow, tightening pressure behind her ribs, the same sensation she'd learned to associate with inevitability. The moment when a theory stopped being a theory. Someone aboard this ship was talking. She leaned back in her chair, eyes unfocused, breathing measured. Panic would cloud judgment. Judgment was the only thing keeping thousands of people alive. "Show me the path," she murmured. The system unfolded obediently. Hop by hop, clean work. Whoever had done this understood protocol, not a rookie, someone trusted. She began narrowing the circle. Clearance levels, access windows, physical location during transmission. She didn't rush. Rushing was how you missed things. Patterns revealed themselves only to patience. By the time the list shrank to 5 names, her jaw had locked so tight it ached. She read them once, then again, and then she saw it. A last name she hadn't spoken out loud in 3 years. Her chest tightened. No, not coincidence. Coincidences didn't survive this long. She pulled the personnel file. Young, brilliant, recently transferred, intelligence track, requested assignment personally. Her stomach sank. The past had found her without permission. She stood slowly, pushing the chair back with controlled movement. Around her, the operations center hummed with artificial calm. Screens glowed. Analysts typed. Life went on. She walked out without explanation. Why does grief make people so easy to manipulate? He looked up the moment she entered. Green eyes, familiar eyes. The resemblance struck her like a blow she didn't flinch from. Same bone structure, same tension in the jaw, the same expression people wore when they believed the world owed them answers. Recognition flickered across his face. "You're real." He didn't say it out loud, but she saw it land. "Lieutenant," she said calmly, "we need to talk." He stood too quickly, defensive. His hand hovered near his sidearm, not threatening, reflexive. She noticed everything. "Private room," he said. Smart, shielded, controlled. They walked in silence. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss that sounded far too final. "You shouldn't be here," he said once they were alone. "You're supposed to be dead." "So is the man you're talking to," she replied. His eyes hardened. "You don't get to say that." She didn't rise to it. Emotion was his battlefield, not hers. "I know what you sent," she said. "I know when, I know to whom." His jaw clenched. "Then arrest me," he snapped. "Do it. Make me the villain so you can walk away clean." She stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "I didn't come here to punish you," she said quietly. "I came to understand you." He laughed bitterly. "You don't understand anything." "Then tell me." Silence stretched. Finally the words spilled, jagged and angry and soaked in loss. He told her about the call, about the man who had sounded regretful, reasonable, about how convincing the lie had been when wrapped in sympathy. He told her about the report that labeled his sister's final stand a failure. He told her about the nights he spent staring at that word. Failure. "You left her," he said. His voice broke on the word, though he tried to hide it. "That's what he said, that you chose the mission over her." She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she reached slowly into her pocket. "Then listen," she said. She placed the device between them. His breathing stuttered. "What is that?" "Truth," she replied, unedited. He stared at it like it might explode. "You had this all along." "Yes." "Then why didn't you?" Because until this moment, she said, voice steady, you weren't ready to hear it. He hesitated. Then he pressed play. Why does the truth hurt more than lies ever could? The room filled with static, distant gunfire, labored breathing. Then her voice. His sister's voice. Strained, fatting, unmistakable. His composure shattered. She watched him fold inward, not dramatically, not loudly. Just a man realizing he'd been angry at the wrong ghost. When the recording ended, he didn't look at her. She said my name, he whispered. She loved you, she said. His shoulders shook. I didn't mean to help him, he said. I thought I was fixing something. I know. Silence again, but this one was different, cleansed, raw. You still have a choice, she said, right now. He looked up, eyes red, focused. What do you need? She exhaled. Something eased in her chest, not relief, alignment. You're going to keep pretending, she said. You're going to send one more message. His eyes widened. That'll get me killed. Not if we're careful. She laid it out slow, precise. False timeline, controlled misinformation, a trap baited with confidence. He trusts you, she said, which means he won't question urgency. He nodded, swallowing hard. And after, he asked. She met his gaze. After you tell the truth. He accepted that. Not bravely. Honestly. Why does resolve feel heavier than fear? Hours later, she stood alone again, watching the ocean through reinforced glass. The ship cut steadily through water that looked deceptively peaceful. Behind her, preparations shifted subtly. Routes adjusted, timelines compressed, all invisible to anyone not looking for change. She pressed her fingers against the glass. This was the part she hated most. Waiting. Her mind drifted, not to tactics but to faces, to people who would never know how close they were to dying. She felt the old weight return. Survivor's guilt never left. It just learned new ways to sit quietly. A soft knock pulled her back. The Admiral stepped in. You were right, he said. We intercepted movement, he took the bait. She nodded once. Then it's begun, she said. He studied her. You could still step back, he offered. Let someone else take point. She shook her head. He'll expect me, she said, and expectations are leverage. The Admiral nodded slowly. Whatever happens, he said, history won't see you. She gave a faint smile. Good. Outside, the horizon darkened as night approached. And far beneath the surface, something moved, silent, patient, convinced it was still in control. She checked her weapon, adjusted the bracelet on her wrist, and prepared to finish what had been left undone. Because some wars aren't fought to win. They're fought so the truth doesn't die quietly again. Why did her hands start shaking only after everything was in place? Not during the planning. Not during the confrontation. Not even when the false transmission went out, carrying just enough truth to be irresistible. Only now. She stood alone in the narrow passageway below deck, the hum of the ship vibrating through her boots. The operation was moving exactly as predicted, timelines aligned, assets repositioned. The enemy had taken the bait. This was the dangerous part. When things go right, people stop questioning them. She clenched her fists until the tremor faded. Control returned. It always did. A soft chime sounded in her earpiece. Contact confirmed, the Admiral said quietly. Subsurface movement detected. Bearing matches your projection. She closed her eyes for half a second. He was coming. Maintain radio silence, she replied. If he believes he's rushed, he'll make mistakes. And if he does, then he hasn't changed, she said, which means he'll underestimate the human cost. The channel went quiet again. She moved forward. Why does stepping into familiar danger feel like returning home? The boarding team waited near the aft access hatch. 6 operators, calm, focused. They didn't ask who she was or why her authority carried weight without insignia. They learned not to question stillness like hers. She briefed them in short, economical phrases. No hero language, no inflated stakes. Objective is control, not destruction, she said. No unnecessary force, no unnecessary noise. One of them hesitated. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "intel suggests the target will scuttle if compromised." She met his eyes. "He won't," she said. "He wants to be heard." That was the truth that frightened her most. The water outside churned softly as the enemy vessel surfaced just enough to be vulnerable. Steel met steel. Magnetic clamps engaged with muted finality. The hatch opened, and the smell hit her instantly. Old metal, oil, stale air recycled too many times. Memory stirred, unwanted and sharp. She pushed it down. They moved. Inside, the corridors were narrower than she remembered. Or maybe she'd grown used to more space between threats. Red emergency lighting pulsed faintly, bathing everything in the color of warnings. No resistance at first. She hated that. They reached the command section in under 3 minutes. Too clean, too easy. Her pulse slowed. "Hold," she whispered. The team froze. She listened. Not with her ears, with experience. There it was. Breathing that didn't belong to someone afraid. "Contact," she said softly. Why do predators always announce themselves when they think they've won? Applause echoed from the shadows. Slow, deliberate. He stepped into the light wearing calm like armor. Older, yes, but not weaker. His eyes still carried that same conviction, that same belief that intellect excused consequence. "I was wondering how long it would take you," he said. "You always did have a sense for timing." Her weapon never wavered. "You're risking a lot for someone who already lost," she said. He smiled. "Lost," he repeated. "No, I adapted. You survived. There's a difference." The team fanned out, weapons trained. He ignored them completely. "You trained them well," he said, nodding toward her team. "But they're just echoes. You're the original." "Talk," she said. "That's why you came." His smile widened. "Still efficient. Yes, I came to finish a conversation we started years ago." "You killed them," she said, not accusing, stating fact. "I made a decision," he replied. "Sacrifice is leadership." Her jaw tightened. "No," she said quietly. "Sacrifice without consent is convenience." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance. "You're emotional," he said. "That's why they died." Her finger rested against the trigger, steady. "They died because you were afraid to admit failure." The words landed. The silence stretched. "You think this ends with you stopping me?" he asked. "Even now, contingencies are in motion." "I know," she said. "That's why you're still breathing." His smile faltered. "Why is mercy harder than pulling the trigger?" She moved closer, slowly, intentionally. The team tensed, but she raised a hand without looking back. "You want the world to know you were right," she said. "That's the only thing you've ever wanted." He laughed softly. "And you want absolution," he said. "You think dragging me into the light will cleanse you." She stopped a few feet away. "I don't want cleansing," she said. "I want closure." In one swift motion, she fired. The shot echoed brutally in the enclosed space. He screamed not from death but from pain. The bullet shattered bone, not life. The room erupted into controlled chaos as operators moved in, securing him, disarming systems, cutting power to his fail-safes. She stood still. Her heart hammered now, not from fear but from the cost of restraint. "You won't kill me," he gasped through clenched teeth. "You never could." She knelt beside him. "No," she said softly, "I won't." She leaned in close enough that only he could hear. "Because living with the truth will hurt you more." His eyes widened, not in fear, in understanding. Why does victory feel hollow before it's even complete? The countdown stopped with seconds to spare. Across the fleet, systems returned to normal. Alarms never sounded. Sailors never knew how close the ocean had come to swallowing them whole. In the medical bay, the man who once commanded her life lay restrained, breathing shallowly, stripped of certainty. She didn't watch him taken away. She couldn't. Instead, she returned to the deck. The sky was pale with approaching dawn. The sea rolled endlessly, indifferent. She rested her hands on the railing and let the cold seep in. This should have felt like triumph. It didn't. She thought of the ones who didn't make it, of promises whispered into dying air, of years spent hiding from a truth that refused to stay buried. A soft step behind her. The Admiral stood beside her, saying nothing. "It's done," he said eventually. She nodded. "But not finished," she replied. He studied her profile. "You could stay," he said, "help shape what comes next." She shook her head slowly. "Some people are meant to close doors," she said, "not guard them." The sun crested the horizon, spilling light across the water. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch at it. But peace still felt distant. Because redemption doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it waits for the last truth to be spoken. And she wasn't done yet. Why did the silence after the mission feel heavier than the danger before it? She noticed it first in the small things. The way conversation stopped when she entered a room. The way eyes followed her, not with suspicion, but with something closer to awe mixed with unease. People sensed gravity even when they didn't know its source. The fleet moved on schedule. Reports were written. Language was chosen carefully, shaved of sharp edges. Success was documented without ever nomming the cost. She sat alone in a dim compartment, listening to the low, constant thrum of engines. It reminded her of breathing, steady, mechanical, indifferent. The ship lived. Thousands of people slept safely because of decisions they would never know were made. That was supposed to be enough. It was. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers lightly touching the black bracelet. The metal inside felt warmer now, as if it had absorbed something from the night. She didn't believe in superstition, but she believed in weight. Objects carried it. So did memories. A knock sounded at the door. She didn't answer right away. When the door slid open, the Admiral stepped inside. He looked older than he had days ago, or maybe more honest. "They've secured him," he said. "He's talking." She nodded. "Not everything," he added. "He never will," she replied. "He'll give just enough to feel relevant." The Admiral studied her. "You predicted that too." "I've known him a long time." Silence returned, settling between them. "You were right about accountability," he said finally. "The truth is inconvenient." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "It usually is." He hesitated, then placed a thin folder on the table between them. Not classified markings. No seals. "What's this?" she asked. "A chance," he said, "to stop running." She didn't open it. "I don't run," she said. "No," he agreed. "You endure, but endurance isn't the same as living." She looked away. "You want me to testify," she said. "Yes." "And be visible." "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. Visibility was exposure. Exposure invited interpretation. And interpretation had a way of twisting truth into something easier to digest and easier to forget. "I'll think about it," she said. The Admiral nodded. He didn't push. He'd learned when silence did more work than pressure. When he left, she finally opened the folder. Names. Dates. Recommendations for commendations. that would never carry her name. At the bottom, a single handwritten note. "Thank you for bringing them home." Her throat tightened. Why does healing feel like betrayal to those who didn't survive? She dreamed that night. Not of gunfire, not of blood. She dreamed of voices, calling her name from places she couldn't reach. When she woke, her pillow was damp. She didn't remember crying. She dressed quietly, moving through corridors before dawn. The ship was quieter then, honest, less guarded. She found the lieutenant near the communications bay, staring at a screen he wasn't really seeing. He straightened when he noticed her. "They cleared me," he said quickly, "conditionally." She nodded. "You told the truth," she said. "That matters." He swallowed. "It doesn't feel like it fixes anything." "It doesn't," she replied, "but it stops the damage from spreading." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and handed her something. A folded piece of paper, old, creased. "I found this in her effects," he said. "They never gave it to me. I think she wanted you to have it." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Just a few lines, hastily written. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. Don't carry this alone. You never were meant to." She closed her eyes. "I should have come sooner," he said. "I should have questioned the story." "We all believe what helps us survive," she said softly, "until it doesn't." He nodded, tears streaking freely now. He didn't hide them. She placed the note back into his hand. "Keep it," she said. "She wrote it for you too." He looked at her in confusion. She met his gaze. "You don't have to earn forgiveness," she said. "You just have to live in a way that honors it." Why does the truth feel heavier once it's finally acknowledged? The hearing took place in a windowless room far from the sea. No uniforms, no ceremony, just people and facts and consequences. She sat at the table, hands folded, voice steady. She spoke of decisions, of omissions, of how easily systems protected themselves at the expense of those inside them. She didn't dramatize. She didn't accuse. She simply told the truth. When it was over, no one applauded. That was fine. Outside, the sky was overcast. She stood on the steps of the building, feeling strangely unanchored. For the first time in years, there was nowhere she had to be. The Admiral joined her. "It's done," he said. She nodded. "Your record will never be public," he added, "but it will be correct." She considered that. "Thank you," she said. He studied her face. "What will you do now?" She looked up at the clouds. "Sleep," she said. "Then maybe remember things that aren't painful." He smiled faintly. "You've earned that." She didn't answer. Earning had nothing to do with it. Why does redemption arrive quietly when no one is watching? Weeks later, she stood in a small cemetery far from any base. No flags, no ranks, just names carved into stone. She knelt before one marker in particular. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "They know now." The wind moved through the trees, carrying no reply. She placed the bracelet at the base of the stone, let it go. Standing, she felt lighter, not healed, not whole, but moving forward. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Thank you," she said, "not to the grave, but to the journey that had brought her here." Somewhere behind her, the world continued, loud, complicated, unforgiving. She stepped back into it anyway. Because survival was never the end of the story. Living was. Why did freedom feel more frightening than the battlefield she'd left behind? No alarms woke her anymore. No radio crackled her name in the dark. No one needed her to decide who lived and who didn't before sunrise. And yet she woke before dawn anyway. Habit was a stubborn thing. It stayed long after danger was gone, like a shadow that didn't know the light had changed. She sat on the edge of the bed in a small, rented apartment overlooking a quiet stretch of water, not strategic, not important, just there. The kind of place people passed without remembering. She had chosen it deliberately. Normal places asked nothing of you. She made coffee she didn't really want and stood by the window as the sky slowly softened from black to gray. Boats moved in the distance, civilian, unarmed, unconcerned. For years, she had protected lives she would never meet. Now she was learning how to live among them. It was harder than she expected. Why do ghosts speak loudest when the war is finally over? The dreams hadn't stopped. They had changed. No more explosions, no more running. Now it was faces, still, watching, waiting. Not accusing, just present. She no longer woke in panic. She woke in reflection. That felt worse sometimes, because it meant she was finally letting herself remember. She had been strong for so long because strength was required. Now it was. And without that armor, emotions moved in quietly, filling the space she'd kept sealed. One afternoon, she found herself standing in a bookstore without knowing how she'd gotten there. Shelves of stories, lives condensed into pages, endings promised. She ran her fingers along the spines, stopping at a memoir she didn't buy. She wasn't ready to see herself reflected yet. Outside, a child laughed somewhere nearby, bright, unburdened. She closed her eyes. This is what you protected, she reminded herself. Not medals, not acknowledgement. Moments like that. Why does healing require witnesses, even when you've lived unseen? The call came unexpectedly. Not urgent, not classified. Just a name on the screen she hadn't seen in weeks. She answered. I didn't know if you'd pick up, the lieutenant said. I almost didn't, she replied honestly. A pause. They asked me to teach, he said. Intelligence ethics, damage assessment. I told them I wasn't sure I was ready. And she asked. And then I remembered what you said, he continued. That living well was enough. She smiled faintly. That's not teaching, she said. That's remembering. He exhaled. I wanted you to know I visit her grave now. I don't talk much, but I go. That matters, she said. Another pause. Do you ever regret it, he asked, coming back into the light. She looked out at the water. No, she said slowly, but I don't romanticize it either. After they hung up, she sat in silence for a long time. Connection felt strange, fragile, like touching something after it had healed, aware it could still hurt. But it felt real. Why does closure arrive not as an answer, but as acceptance? Months later, a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single page. The man who had once commanded her life had taken a plea deal. No speeches, no final monologue. His name would fade quietly into legal archives and redacted history. No one would chant it. No one would remember him as a visionary. Just a cautionary footnote. She folded the paper and placed it in a drawer. She felt no satisfaction. Only relief. Some endings didn't need witnesses. Why does dignity show itself in what we choose not to say? On a cool morning, she returned to the cemetery one last time, not out of obligation, but choice. She stood before the markers, hands in her coat pockets, breathing in air that smelled of earth and leaves. I don't carry it alone anymore, she said quietly, like you asked. She didn't promise to never hurt again. She didn't promise to be whole. She promised to live honestly. That felt truer. As she turned to leave, an older man stood a few rows away, hat in hand. He nodded to her just once, respect without curiosity. She returned the nod. That was enough. Why do the strongest people walk away without applause? Years later, somewhere far from fleets and briefing rooms, an admiral would be asked in an interview about the closest the Navy had ever come to disaster without the public knowing. He would pause. choose his words carefully, and say, "We were saved by someone who didn't need credit." He would not give her name. He would not give her number. But sometimes, late at night, he would remember a woman standing calmly in a room full of laughter, and how everything changed when she spoke. Why does strength often look like silence? She never wore a uniform again, never counted anything that couldn't be returned. She volunteered quietly, lived simply, helped where she could without explaining why she knew how. And when people asked about her past, she learned to smile gently and say, "I did my part." Because some people aren't meant to be remembered for what they destroyed. They're remembered, if at all, for what they protected. And sometimes, the most powerful legacy isn't a story told loudly, but a life lived with quiet, unshakable dignity. Because dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.